Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. So you may have noticed that Warhammer seems to be having a bit of a logistics issue right now. Day one products seem to be selling out almost instantly, which is great for Games Workshop, less so for us fans who really want those products. But strangely enough, some of those products that have been out for weeks and months just don't seem to be coming back into stock as quickly as we would like. And you can probably think of ranges in Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar where the models just aren't there to buy, and you seem to be waiting for a notification from the Games Workshop web store for when you can actually hand over your money and get hold of those models. But interestingly, I was in my local Warhammer store recently and I was talking to the manager there, and we were discussing why it was taking so long to get hold of models and how long order times were, and he suggested a really interesting idea. And bear in mind, this is just his opinion, but he is obviously aware of the conversations happening in Games Workshop right now. His idea was that down the line over the next few years, the company might move to having 3D printers in the Warhammer stores themselves, and you'll be able to effectively go into a store and, a bit like ordering online within the store itself, select the models you want, disappear for a few hours, come back and pick up the sprues there and then on demand. And in this video, I just want to talk a little bit about that idea. Again, it was just his opinion and it was a really interesting discussion we had, but I think there are some really obvious pros to that, but potentially some cons as well. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. Now, before I get into anything, I do want to say that this isn't a discussion about the nitty-gritty of 3D printing, how Games Workshop would roll out the digital designs or manage the individual parts of the logistic chain. It's more a general conversation, and in the first instance, I was actually really surprised that a GW store manager was kind of suggesting this, because first and foremost, Games Workshop has always had a bit of a tumultuous relationship with 3D printing. Obviously, lots of people have their own 3D printers and they use them to produce what they argue are better and cheaper models that they can use for their Warhammer games. But that undercuts Games Workshop quite a bit. Their mandate as a business, first and foremost, and they put it on their website, is to make the best models they can. The lore, the books, all the extras around the hobby are supplementary to that goal. They are all about producing models. And so Games Workshop stepping into 3D printing would be a very bold statement and a kind of endorsement, if you will, of the very technology they've been competing with all this time. And I'm a bit unsure about how 3D printers would respond in the first instance, or what the community would think in terms of whether they themselves could get into 3D printing. The other side of it, though, is independent retailers. They're a massive part of the economy of Warhammer, if you want to call it that, but obviously they couldn't benefit from that technology. Games Workshop's not going to put digital 3D printers in independent retailers because arguably they could then sell those designs onto other people with their own 3D printers, and it would break the whole chain down completely. And so you'd have a situation where Games Workshop HQ is producing the models up in Nottingham. Independent retailers are trying to sell those models from them, but people can kind of go past both and get them potentially from the store direct. So what do independent retailers offer? That would be a really interesting question if this particular kind of model existed. And I'm not entirely sure that independent retailers would win out at the end of the day. But of course, there are some really clear benefits for an approach like this. For example, I think it would help to at least ease some of the stock issues we're seeing right now, and hopefully ease some of the tension players have when they're trying to get hold of all these different new model ranges, especially as the meta of Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar is changing all around us. But ultimately, it could also help to remodel Warhammer as a company to the extent that you could pretty much go into any Warhammer store and get the models you want pretty much instantly. To use their own phrase, you can get more Warhammer more often. And to give you an example, Deathwing Assault, that came out a few weeks ago and it sold out near enough instantly. They did bring a few more back into stock, but pretty much most people who wanted this set haven't been able to get hold of Belial, the new Deathwing Knights, the Dark Angels upgrade sprue. Imagine if you could go into a Warhammer store today and get all of those, as many as you wanted, in about 2 to 4 hours. I think that could potentially change the whole way people interact with Warhammer stores, and really at the end of the day that's what Games Workshop wants: more people coming into the stores more often where they can talk to their customers, they can build up the hobby, interest new people, and they haven't got to worry about the sort of business logistics hampering that experience for people. Again, I think that could be absolutely transformative for not just the business but the hobby overall. And very quickly, looking at it from Games Workshop's perspective, it could also mean that they can use use their stores as kind of almost mini distribution centres where they can print sprues locally in store and then maybe ship them out domestically to the people who want them, or they can use new stores they create to help fuel greater expansion of the Warhammer hobby and just engage new people more quickly while they set up, I guess, the bigger logistics chains down the line where they ship stuff over from Nottingham, UK to America, Asia, Europe and so on. Now, as incredible as this all sounds, there are some potential cons. For example, on price. Games Workshop could very well argue that this is a bit of a premium service, and to cover the cost of rolling out 3D printers and the other sort of logistics issues they've got, they have to charge a little bit more money. And I'm sure they could also argue that by charging a bit more money in the first place, fewer people take up the service, and it means they don't get overwhelmed by demand, which would otherwise bring them back to where we were at the start of this conversation. But on the flip side, you could also argue that by avoiding shipping costs and potentially not having the products in boxes, although the manager I spoke to suggested that you could also print the boxes in the stores themselves, maybe that sort of Warhammer Light experience means that you don't have to pay as much money as you would otherwise do in store, or maybe you just don't see as many price rises as a result. But clearly there's a bit of a question around pricing, and my thinking is that Games Workshop would lean towards the more premium view of what this offers more so than the other one. But then there's the issue of returns. Obviously with many 3D model suppliers you can't just return the models because they're made to order, but with Games Workshop you would have the legal right to return those products. So how easily can they take those models back and recycle them into models that then other customers want to buy? I'm not entirely sure of where the science is right now, but they have started to experiment with recycling in stores, so maybe that's laying the foundation for something, but clearly that's an important point. You'd need to be able to return the products if you didn't want them in order to get your money back. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not suggesting there's a one-size-fits-all approach or that suddenly Games Workshop's going to shift to producing all of its kits in the back of its Warhammer stores. They've clearly spent a lot of time building up their manufacturing capabilities all across the world, and those aren't going anywhere. But I do think this 3D printing idea sits hand in hand with what they already have, and it could be they use it to produce some of the more niche and less frequently bought model ranges that they have. For example, movement trays in Warhammer the Old World and the other accessories that sit around Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar, or maybe Legends models that have gone out of print and they bring them back into print on demand for a short time span and use the Warhammer store 3D printers to produce those more frequently and more quickly. Or maybe they go big and start printing these massive Warhammer Fantasy terrain pieces from back in the day that so many people are calling for right now, especially since Warhammer the Old World came out. Your guesses are as good as mine, but as I said earlier in the video, if there's a technology that helps Games Workshop to produce more Warhammer more often, I think it's something they'll at least consider, and it may well be something that we see in the not too distant future. So those are just a few of my own thoughts on 3D printing in Warhammer stores. Again, it was a discussion between me and my local Warhammer store manager, and there was a lot of ideas thrown around, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts about it. Do you think it's something that could potentially work within Warhammer stores? What are the problems? And would you potentially pay slightly more to get your Warhammer on demand in that way, or would you just stick to what we already have? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. But as always, a big thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please do click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to join me for future Warhammer videos, and I hope to see you for my next one. But until then, take care.